opinions expressed in the following are those of its participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the producers and the Six Talk Podcast Network. Also, the following contains mature material and mild language, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Discretion is advised.
For Sunday afternoon, April 18th, 2021, this is episode 40 of the Anime Roundtable Canada. Greetings and salutations from 6 Points, 10 minutes south of the Anime North compound in the west end of Toronto. Mike Nicolas in the captain's chair, kicking ass and taking names. James Austin and Kevin Ng along for the ride this week. As always, we want you to join the conversation. AnimeRoundtable@gmail.com is our email, Twitter and Instagram @AnimeRoundtable. AnimeRoundtable.com is our blog with show notes and past episodes. And if you follow us on Twitter and Instagram, you're likely to get a thank you from us as well, which probably means that nobody is following us. But let's talk about something that has more than a few Twitter followers than this podcast. In all of the rough stuff that was 2020, and you know there was a lot of it, there were a few feel-good moments as well. The anime community was no exception, mainly on the side of cancellations of conventions. One of the bright spots was Anime Lockdown, the little improvised online anime show that tried to fill in the void when it became obvious that there would be plenty of them. It set up pretty much the tone as more well-known anime names in the fan convention scene, whether they be Anime Expo or Anime Central, right down to the big ones like Comic-Con, adjusted to the pandemic situation and had similar online presentations of their own. Anime Lockdown became arguably anime fandom's feel-good moment of 2020. But that was last year. As the pandemic unfortunately continues to grind along, the cancellations have already begun. We talked about Anime North last week. Otakon continues to monitor. And Anime Expo, should it return, has announced a more scaled-back version. With those questions now being asked, one place a good number of fans have been looking for an answer from is Anime Lockdown, who have largely kept a low profile. Until now. Just kidding. It's not as if Anime Roundtable has a huge forum to come out and make yourself publicly known. That said, we are happy that the man behind it, the Director of Operations, JP, has decided to join us again to catch up on Anime Lockdown 1 year later. And welcome back, JP. It's good to hear from you again.
Hey, happy to be back. You made me sound like a supervillain. I kind of like that.
Really?
I just like one name that's been in the shadows ever since. Anime Lockdown.
Well, that's sort of how we're kind of coming out to the greater Anime North public right now on Facebook. Did you know that Anime North has an official podcast? It's just lurked in the shadows for years. That's the intro I made when we promoted the last episode on the official Facebook page. But as I said, that's another story. I get the feeling we will tie in some of the Anime North chat from last week into this too. So where do you want to start with talking about things 1 year later for Anime Lockdown?
I don't know. I mean, the main reason why the Twitter has been quiet is I just like, it's kind of not what we're about. Like most cons, when they're in their off season, are talking about advertisements and go to this screening, and that was never part of the plan. It was always just like, hey, we're a con. Mm-hmm. And that's all we are. We didn't have any partnerships. We're not here to like advertise and tell people to go buy something. And so it's just that we're not currently planning anything, so there was nothing to announce. You know, occasionally I would tweet some random thought about the con, but we weren't like intentionally being secretive.
No, I know. I'm kind of I'm painting you like the bad guy here. I'm sorry. I don't
know about bad guys. You know, like I follow a couple conventions on Twitter, and like a lot of what they post throughout the year is just like irrelevant to me. You know, like if I want to know what's happening, I can read a news site. I'm not going to go to like the Otakon Twitter to find out when like My Hero Academia is coming out.
Well, that's true too. I mean, we all have our obvious sources, right? Anime News Network obviously goes without saying, but
Mhm.
then other sites like Kotaku or Comic Books or even Hollywood Reporter sometimes had the odd story that catches our attention and has become fairly reliable in the way we're looking at things
Mhm.
here. So 1 year onward, almost 1 year, it's like what anime lockdown took place in May of last year, right? If
Yeah, it was
memory
May
serves me
1 through
correct.
3rd.
Oh yeah, so we're like 2 weeks away from the anniversary of the show.
Yeah, I didn't realize that until the other night when I found out I might be working on May 1st. I'm like, great.
Well, yeah, I mean that's update things because just a quick update. When we first talked with JP in mid-May, he was unemployed,
Yes,
and
very.
but that's not the case anymore.
No, I
As
went back to work around Halloween. I work
oh,
in TV, so I've been working on a season of a TV show since then. We are wrapping at the end of May.
okay, so I guess just to get bottom line with this, what is the prospects of doing a second version of Anime Lockdown at this point?
I don't know. I've been thinking about it, and I know that people would be excited for it, but it's been my work schedule makes it very difficult to plan anything. I only get the 2 days off to do anything, whether grocery shopping or running errands. I don't have a lot of time to sit around and plan a convention. When I did lockdown, it was a lot of like sitting at my computer for 14 hours a day for like 3 weeks straight, and I just said that's not a realistic thing that I can do currently. So if it does happen, it's going to be a much longer planning phase, and I have to make sure that I have time off, which is more in the air now that I'm working again, because it's not like a normal job where it's like, oh, I work these days to this day and I can ask for this time off. It's like you're almost on call. You don't know what time you work until the end of your shift because
Mm,
everything is just being planned as you go. If it did happen, it wouldn't be until the show is done, the show I'm working on. So it'd be either in June or July. But I guess my biggest concern is, would anybody even bother? Because people are kind of burnt out with online conventions, and like I attended an online convention a couple weeks ago, and there was like 10 people watching. And it's not about like, oh, if nobody's watching, I don't want to do it. Or I should say, it's not about like, oh, I just want these hundreds and hundreds of people to watch this thing. It's more like I don't want to put all of this work in and make everybody put all of this work in if it's not going to, if nobody's going to show up. Um, because
mm.
it's a tremendous amount of work for both me and the panelists, and if only like 10 or 15 people show up, then we might as well not do it.
Okay, that's an honest take. Two things come to mind. One, reality does bite sometimes.
Hmm.
And it has me thinking, what are we going to do with this podcast when things are normal again? I mean, by my own admission, and I've stated I've been out of work myself, and that for me that remains the case. So I have no life, and I've been able to give myself time to churn out these episodes. And Kevin and James and Mohammed and Jeff have been good enough to take time as their weekends have begun to be able to spend a couple hours chatting and having them recorded. So it has me thinking what will happen as well should something more normal happen back in my life again.
Yeah.
Second, my second takeaway is, and we just mentioned this just before we started taping, although it was mentioned last episode as well, a live version of this podcast will be done during Anime North's online presentation, which they rebranded, by the way. Because remember last year we made the joke, Momiji's online experience, MOE,
Mhm.
really? And it's now been rebranded to, what is it? Anime North, the Stay at Home Edition. That's what they'll call the online version, which would have taken place during the traditional Anime North weekend, which is Memorial Day weekend in the States. And it had us thinking, Well, first of all, yeah, we're gonna do something like that. We're gonna do a live version of the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But you now had me thinking, with what you just said, how many will actually watch it?
I mean, it's going to depend on the convention. Obviously, the virtual convention I was going to was a small Minnesota online convention, whereas like the Funimation Con and Crunchyroll Con had a much higher turnout. I don't know what the turnout was for the first virtual Anime North, so it might be comparable.
Yeah. Well, and like we are talking. Well, there's brand names in terms of the conventions themselves, in terms of fan conventions, but then there's brand names in terms of corporate stuff, right? And I
Sure.
think that's what you're kind of getting at
Well, I
with
just
all that.
because the Anime North is like an established con, so they might have a better chance of pulling people than say. Well, I guess Anime Detour also is, but it's Anime Detour
Hmm.
gets I think 5,000 people for their live event. So
Okay.
it might have just been, it might have been marketing. It might have been that people didn't want to go. I don't know what went into so few people going to that convention. Um, but I know that virtual conventions, I think the attendance has been going down.
Well, time of year, or do you think
Well, I think
like
people
we
are.
got all conventioned out?
I think it's a combination. I think that it's people going back to work. It's people conventioned out. It's people that are depressed that live conventions aren't happening, and the virtual conventions just reminds them that it's not happening. I know I've been really starting to miss it. I mean, this is the longest it's been since I've gone to a con, and I just like every day I keep remembering different um, memories of like past conventions I've gone to, and I don't know, like Otakon is looking like it could potentially happen. I don't know if I would be comfortable going to that. That's still pretty soon. But Anime NYC is in November, and I'm considering it. That's what 6 or 7 months from now.
And we have time to wait to find out,
Yeah.
right?
I guess the other thing to go back to what I was saying before is the thing that I'm most concerned about holding a second convention is that it's not going to meet people's expectations, because
Ah,
so much of what we did the first time was it was luck. Like, we got guests, we got industry guests, we had a DJ, and a year later those people aren't going to be as excited to try this thing, because it's like it's been done a dozen, 100 times now. Like, guests were reaching out to me, and now so many of them have moved on and done their own things. Like, Discotheque now just does their own panel like every other month, and they get more people showing up than they did when they did our thing. And so what's the incentive for them to come do our show again if they can do double the audience on their own and without a time limit?
sounds like the streaming industry. Actually, sorry, that's another story altogether.
Yeah.
What was the peak of Discotheque? Was the largest was
They were
had
the
the largest
largest. It
attendance,
was
and
around
what was
850, I think.
okay
Yeah.
compared to James? James, I know you kept up with those numbers a little better than I would have. What was the highest number you could recall in the Twitch presentations they did? Do you remember?
They were definitely higher, I think, than what we had, but they were still at certain points comparable to what we saw. So obviously, they were drumming up things through their social media and stuff like that too. So that helped, and they kept up with people because they started doing, I guess, streaming of some of their shows that weren't on streaming platforms, and some of those fans came in, and those were obviously lower numbers. But the big presentations and then the Memories premiere, those were huge numbers for them. And probably the big thing, as JP said, is having no time limit for them does help, because I think the last one in March, we talked about that and they joked, they said, okay, it's going to be a short presentation. We'll be fine. And then it just kept on going and going because of the Q&A somehow
Well, yeah, both
in
the
the
Q and
conversation.
A and we've mentioned before sometimes the personalities. We after all we are talking Brady, Mike, and Justin,
Yeah.
and you know how those could go sometimes, especially with Mike.
I'm
Yeah.
pretty
I
sure it
mean,
went over 1,000.
oh,
Yeah.
definitely. It was
Well,
it
I
was
went.
They
I went.
definitely went over
approaching 1500 for sure.
Okay. So
Um yeah. If we did do a convention and they came back, I'd have to give them around 2 hours. um it's just like, they can do it and they pull a crowd. It's hard to say no to the star of the show.
Well, it would be, yes. Well, there's also, I guess, another aspect to the way things are going in 2021 is, for lack of a better choice of words, we're seeing a lot of hedging here, like trying to hedge your bets in some ways. You talk about Anime Expo, constantly mentioning when they do a live version again, or at least if they're to do the one that they would have done in July, it would be very much scaled back. Anime North was always going to do, like, Anime North's plan this year also was to have an online component on the traditional weekend in late May, which we'll be a part of. And then in late July, I think it would be the first weekend of the Tokyo Olympics, they would have had a scaled down in person version. That was the plan for 2021, if I remember correctly. The early on, it became obvious in 2021 that maybe the in person thing would probably not be ideal. So that was quickly canceled within the first quarter of 2021. And all that remains now is the online. So this is where we sit. We're in this should we or shouldn't we? Whereas last year it was pretty obvious and everything could go full bore. And I guess maybe that's where a lot of the issues tend to be right now amongst possible con goers. There's this combination, this storm of being conventioned out, post convention syndrome, as I like to call it. And maybe some are still suffering from it in some form. And then there's this chomping at the bit to get back to in person stuff. And that isn't just anime, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And for reference, just a quick aside, and we won't dwell on it here in Ontario, just a quick local update on terms of the COVID thing. And you thought it couldn't get any worse. And that's as much as we'll say. I'll say this week on it. We'll say more maybe next time.
Right.
But that's the feeling I have right now, I guess. And I'm talking as somebody who hasn't really done conventions much in the last 10 years. It's just Anime North, really. Hardly seen Fan Expo. Hardly seen anything smaller. Because, well, mentioned I had a life back then. And life's at a standstill now. Oh, go ahead, James. Did you want to say something?
No, I was just thinking about what you said about Anime Expo because it doesn't seem to me like they're going to have an in-person event because E3 the month before is going to go online only. And it sounds like they're probably going to have to do the same thing they did before and do an online event for that. And even some of these other events, I'm talking about concerts and stuff like that, that people want to go to. You look at Ontario, there are tickets for, I think it's a July show of Justin Bieber. They were making fun of it on the radio I was listening to yesterday about going to the show, them having them for sale and saying, what's the likelihood that show actually happens in Toronto at the Air Canada Centre? I'm thinking no.
So there's a bunch of ways we could, like, this whole conversation could go now, right? I mean, when I just started and when I introed you back in, JP, I called anime lockdown something to fill the void when it was obvious the voids were there and were coming. And I think the rest of the world, at least the world, the convention world, has figured out ways to navigate that void or finally fill it in themselves. So, do you have this feeling that maybe lockdown has served its purpose?
I think it served its purpose when it happened. Certainly, I feel like other people are putting on shows that I'm not capable of, and that's part of what I wonder if anybody would bother, because a lot of people came to Anime Lockdown because while we weren't the first one to do it, we were one of the loudest. We were one of the first, and people came there because they were curious. They had nothing else going on, and now there's been so many more online conventions, and I don't really know how we would have any like big draw. Like, I guess I could try to get guest speakers. Like, I thought about asking if Helen McCarthy would speak and see if Mike Toole would come back. It would probably be a much more curated event and not a, just anybody that signs up can speak kind of a thing. Not that I would like, specifically turn people away, but I would try, because there's so much more competition, I would try to be a lot more thoughtful about every single event that's being held.
Hmm. Well,
And that's
don't
kind
feel
of
bad.
ties into that one article we were looking at, doesn't it, Mike?
We'll get
Because
to that. Yeah,
there
let's.
was a convention every weekend, and now, as we say, a virtual event every weekend. So you kind of have to think about what is my virtual event and who's the audience I'm trying to reach out to, and how will I reach them? And
Yeah.
it's a global audience, and depending on the language too, in that.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's. Well, I guess. Well, the article James is referencing is something that's appears on the Project Anime page. Just a op-ed piece about the future of pop culture conventions, which okay read. Nothing really earth shattering in it. Some thought provoking, but in many respects, we've covered all those thoughts. It just puts it all in one place,
You're a lot
right?
nicer than I am. I read that this morning and it was
You
all
found it
just corporate bullshit.
dry, perhaps, right?
Well, I mean, I get where they're coming from because that's what their audience is. I'd never heard of them before, but it seems that they're like a convention. You go there to learn how to organize your convention. And so the whole thing is like, find out how to maximize your profits and how to reach this thing in e-commerce. I'm like, Jesus, why am I reading this?
It's like a
Well,
website for professionals, and that
Yeah.
is like anime professionals from the people that do Anime Expo. But you're right, it is very corporate jargon and stuff like that. And they admit, if you read deeper into it, that some of the conventions, some of the bigger ones, would have more success, obviously, than others doing a virtual component and stuff like that, because maybe not everyone wants to go all 3 days and they want to get off their feet for that third day or something like that
Yeah.
and interacting that, and that the smaller ones would have to work really really hard and maybe work together to actually make it a success, and that's a hard thing to do.
yeah, it's about yeah. I know it's about branding away from from local, like an anime expo being less. Not an, well, Anime Expo is a pretty bad example actually because it's a brand name even outside of LA, right?
And the other thing is that's where a lot of the Japanese licensors and things, they went to the American side and the English side, and that's where they'd make deals and stuff like that. So there's that cachet as well. But then the thing for even those ones is that other corporate types could look in and say, well, why can't we do our own? Like you look at Funimation, they can say, hey, we did our own thing last year. Let's do it again. We don't need these guys.
That's as I said, that sounds like the streaming world
Yeah.
these days.
Well, it really depends on like the goals of your convention, and it's just something I've learned by when I moved to the East Coast. I started to go to a lot more cons because when I was in Minnesota, I had one option and no money to travel, whereas now I have dozens of conventions in my area that can easily be reached with a cheap bus ticket. And what I realize is that some of these bigger shows like Anime NYC, Anime Expo, Anime Next, they almost seem to exist more as like a marketing arm of the anime industry. You're just going there to buy a bunch of shit and go to industry panels, whereas the smaller conventions like Anime Detour or Anime Lockdown seem to be a lot more like local, more personality. Like people go to Anime Detour to see the panels because they know the panelists, they know the guests that come there every year. Yeah, they still buy stuff, but I think that's why the Anime Detour virtual convention was so smallly attended, because it didn't have, I guess, the global reach that Anime Japan Project, whatever the website was called, is looking for, because it's almost like a family there. And I think the people that would normally be going to these panels just don't follow them on Twitter, and so they didn't even know the event was happening. Whereas if they had big name guests like, I don't know, Studio Trigger or whatever, they would have reached that wider audience that the bigger conventions do. But that's not really what their goal is. They're a small convention. They've always been a small convention. Like the con chair knew me by name, which was really weird. I mean, I don't mean to imply that he's weird for knowing my name. It was a weird feeling that he, in his opening statement or whatever, he's like, and it's too bad that JP isn't here. Like, how does he know me? It's, that's the type of con it is.
Oh, well. You see, when you just said all of that, it made me think of, well, we've all had this long discussion on the show about Anime North itself, and is it hitting a crossroads of sorts? Because it always it's constant billing as Canada's biggest fan-run convention.
Premier fan run convention,
Or
I think is what they call it.
that's the catch.
But as they
That's the catchphrase.
said, ever since the beginning, they've had those opportunities for some of the bigger anime companies to come into the dealer's room and to do other things, but they've pushed back on those things and said, you can come, but we don't want the big pizzazz like you have at Otakon or Anime Expo or some of the bigger ones, and that we're all about doing fan-driven events and stuff like that. And you see it through their program because they have so many different tracks and stuff like that for panels, for historical, for Japanese culture, for video games. It goes on and on. So it's almost like these small mini cons within a bigger con run for fans by fans. But then you have the speed bumps that come along with that, as we said, that you don't always see at the bigger cons that are more corporate run.
Well, or just, yeah, I mean, corporate run has a certain polish to it, whereas, and we're going to use a popular phrase on this show as of late, for better or worse, Anime North has that charm, and I think it prefers to have its trudge along type charm.
I certainly prefer cons like that.
Yeah, maybe that's part of the enduring nature of something like Anime North.
It's interesting because I swear that a lot more people said compared to West Coast cons, East Coast cons more have that down home feel and stuff like that, where you're going to see your friends that one weekend of the thing. And I know Anime North as well. They kind of grew it. It was like Ontario, GTA, and then it's like all across Canada. And now it's like we have the reach to some of the border states and stuff like that, like Michigan, Ohio, and New York. And I've talked to people that were all the way from Florida, and they enjoyed the difference and stuff like that because it was just a unique experience to them, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I guess that this is the whole power of the differentiation between a local convention and something more global, because the more global you get, I guess the more corporate you get. And Anime North is a weird one because it's more on the former side of it, the organic, but it's just still very big.
How many people go every year? Do you know?
James?
I think we're over 25,000. So with staff and everyone there, we had, I think, last time around 30,000 people there. And I think for people through the gate, it might have been around 25,000. It was a lot of people.
That's big.
Like it was one of the top 10 cons still to this day and stuff like that. And it's one of the biggest for a fan run type event of its kind and stuff like that.
Yeah, I guess now
It's
that
not Anime Expo or Otakon, but compared to everyone else, it's very big.
And that's like Anime Next, I think, does similar numbers, and that's a pretty big event. Like 20,000 people is nothing to. I don't know the phrase. It's
that.
nothing to,
it's good.
yeah, nothing to scoff at.
I was going to say shake a stick at. I don't know if that's a phrase though.
But it's a weird anomaly, something a fan run getting. I guess it's sort of, yeah. I'll say it again, an anomaly of sorts.
It is
and
weird.
I guess some of the staff talk about it too, because some people take their week off and stuff like that, either before or after Anime North or in between it, just so they can get prepared for this weekend, stuff like that, because it's just become such a big event to get all the gear in and get everything ready. Because as we said, it just takes over this big compound of hotels and the Congress Center at Dixon there.
Which is just beside the Toronto airport, just for reference, JP. Just to give a sense.
I've never been to Canada. I don't know where these things are.
Well,
And the
we
good
just
thing
to
is
give
that was
a
a
sense
choice
to.
too. Like be near the airport so you can get
Yeah.
everyone in and out and stuff like that. It's like
Yeah,
so.
that's not a bad idea. I really like the smaller cons. As much as I love Otakon, Anime Detour, what I really liked about it is that we would just take over a hotel. We would take over one hotel, and like, there would be others in the area, but people would just stay it there.
Mhm.
There wouldn't be events held there, and it really changes the vibe now that I've been to these bigger East Coast cons. They feel very impersonal when you go to something like Otakon or
Okay.
Anime
There's a
NYC.
key. That's a key word, I think.
And I still have a good
That's a fair word.
time, but at the smaller cons where you have really no choice but to run into the same people all day, and they'd also have party rooms because it's in a hotel and there's not 50,000 people. You could go and like just drink and party all night with other con goers at officially sanctioned parties. Um, it's great. It's probably pretty irresponsible to stay up all night drinking, but
We're getting there.
it's a good time. And what really kind of blew my mind when I went to shows like Otakon and Anime Next is like everything just shuts down at like 11 and you get kicked out of the convention center.
Well, you're making me think of the comparisons between my Fan Expo time and my Anime North time.
Yeah, because we just kind of at midnight or 11 or whatever, it's like boom, the switch is off, isn't it, Mike? For
Hmm.
Fan Expo and stuff like that, they would have like run down some clubs and like have a dance or have like a club night and stuff like that. But there's nothing happening in that convention center. Whereas Anime North, yes, well, actually, no, they are doing stuff at the Congress Center where they have different raves and stuff like that happening in the parking lots. And then at the hotel, sometimes they have after hours events and stuff like that. For
Well,
example,
sure,
the all night
like
room that
us
I help run and
and
stuff like
and
that in one of the
you
hotels.
and the all night track that you help program, right, James?
Yeah,
I
but
guess.
some of that is people just trying to find a place to sleep.
Yeah.
Oh, that too, because they can't afford a hotel room. Oh, maybe there isn't too much else to add to this, but
I don't know. I know that I miss conventions, but I'm not necessarily ready to go to one.
okay, I guess that's a
Maybe by
bottom
the end of
line
the
too.
year.
I guess, and that's now the U.S. has a slightly improved situation compared to Canada. Just going back to all of that, and yeah, I guess there's still a degree of wariness. So take what's going on here in Canada. It's an even more slightly more dire situation or rougher situation right now.
Well,
We're
conventions
not.
were already a sanitation nightmare. Like I would come home with the flu almost every time I went to a con, or at least a
Oh,
cold.
so post convention syndrome may not be totally a metaphor. It
Yeah,
might be
no, I
literal in
mean,
some ways too.
con flu is very real. You're spending 3 days not sleeping enough, eating terribly, drinking too much, and being around people that are probably not showering.
That
Um,
messes your immune system, perhaps.
yeah, well, and at these smaller cons, not at like Otakon and like Anime Expo, but at these smaller cons like Anime Detour, they would have free food for everybody. We had a thing called the Con Suite,
Oh
and
yeah, that's
it's
there.
it's fine, but it's like that's just not going to be a realistic thing uh, for a while. For people that don't know what a con suite is, it's just like you get in line and they would have like rice or sandwiches or like a fountain soda. And you just get in line, you show them your badge, and you get to eat whatever you want.
Mhm.
And if you just eat white rice and Diet Coke all weekend, you're not going to feel good on Monday.
Oh, it's carbolicious. Lots of starches there. I guess there isn't too much else to add to this then. Um, you sound like you're in a good spot though, JP. Like well, more or less at peace with everything accomplished in terms of the lockdown side, and
I'm really
maybe
happy with how lockdown went. There's
and
not, I mean, I have some minor regrets, but nothing that I could have fixed at the time. Like there were certain, like the YouTube got killed on day one, Facebook got killed before the convention started, but I couldn't have known that was going to happen. I mean, I prepared for it, but like there's nothing I can do to change that. Um, and like not all of the panelists were prepared as much as I wish they would have been. But again, it's like there's nothing I could have done to fix that. I did the best that
No,
I could. Everybody showed up
that's
on time, with only one exception. Everything ended on time. And I let discotheque go late because it's like whenever people were having fun. The rave went better than I imagined it would, and the
mhm.
DJ that put it on made a shitload of money from what I mean, he didn't tell me a number, but I know he paid off his credit card based on tips,
Nice.
Way to go.
which is cool.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah, it
Well,
was.
it just sounds like you're at peace and you're okay. Like, bottom line, you're okay walking away from it.
I don't want to say that because I would like to do something like it, if not the same thing. I haven't had time to sit and think about it because I'm too tired from work. Once work slows down / goes away for a while, then it opens up the opportunity to start
Mhm.
thinking about it. I would say the worst case scenario, absolute worst case scenario, is doing a shorter event. Not trying to
So
do a
Mm,
3-day event again.
maybe a 1 day event would be a better idea because I was thinking you would do something maybe more scaled down and that you wouldn't have as much planning.
Yeah, one or two. I don't know. It's hard because Anime Detour did a 2-day event, like a day and a half kind of a thing, and it kind of bummed me out that it was so short. But at the same time, I get it because it's so much work and so many things have to happen. Like the fact that everybody showed up on time is, I cannot stress enough how lucky I was for that to happen, because I went to some of these other virtual cons and they were having shit running late, and that's just not acceptable. You can't. That's everything else could go wrong, but you can't. It's just my belief from doing live radio. You cannot tell somebody that something is happening at a specific time and then not have it happen, because if one thing happens late, then it messes up your entire schedule, and then your people don't have a menu for the day anymore. And
punctuality. Yeah, I get it on
You can't
punctuality.
have dead air, that's for sure. Yeah.
I mean, dead air is one. If somebody doesn't show up, that's one thing. You can say, "Hey, Bob didn't show up. We're gonna play music for an hour." But if Bob shows up 20 minutes late and still wants to do his panel, it's a. I would rather he doesn't show up at all. Because it's going to be a lot more complicated. Now he's rushing through things, and I don't know. There is no Bob. I just said that name.
Just gave a name. Well, I guess no, it is nice to know where things do stand. So that part's appreciated. So the time in that sense is appreciated.
It's a hard.
So,
It's a hard, maybe a soft, probably. We'll say that.
a good way to put it. But in the end, you did it as a fan. You
Yeah,
did this because you were a fan, and sometimes we're all still curious about the anime industry. I think we're done with the convention talk, I guess, for now, right?
I think
I think for
so.
now. I think so. So let's I think we all made the pact today to try and do this in one take today. So we're not going to take a break. Let's get right to it. The other thing is JP does like talking anime quite a bit,
You got me.
and really just about any other topic on the under the sun. In the end, we're all fans. So, do you want to do a set of bullets with us, JP, before we go?
I mean, we've still got plenty of time before I said I was going to cut you off.
Well, the thing is, here's and this is the intro we use. This is the intro we use whenever I start the bullets.
Yeah,
These are small things which may become big things, and knowing that James is here and Kevin too, we can inflate this real good.
I mean, you only tagged 5 news stories, and we've still got an hour before I got to go grocery shopping.
Let's see what happens. And we can play a little game of yes and no towards the end.
Okay. I don't know what that is. It sounds ominous. But we're going to talk
Nothing
about
more.
some news, right? That's like my
Well,
specialty these days.
let's talk about things that caught our attention, at least over the last week. Well, on the topic of conventions going global, which was the part of the crux of the Project Anime article, which seemed to turn you off, JP. And
I just
yeah, it's just a dry read.
I just don't
Admittedly,
care
right.
about corporations. I don't know. For me, convention is about going and having fun and talking about anime and like being with your friends. It's not about boosting profits, and that's how that. And I get that, like, it is a business and people have to make money, but like, I ran Anime Lockdown so we could have fun and talk about anime. I turned down sponsors because I didn't want to make it about that.
Okay. That's an interesting way to put it. Although we're about to talk about the companies and their moves.
Oh, everything we do is capitalism. I mean, we're sitting around watching advertisements all day and then talking about them and talking about which ones we want to buy. Like, I'm not. I know what we're doing.
If we're really nice to them, sometimes we'll buy the manga or the video game or who knows what else they have.
Okay, James, do you want to preface some of this, because most of this is your caller this week?
Well,
let's start with the fandom post, because it kind of was a prelude to some of the other moves that would eventually happen.
Well, we were looking at stuff we had talked about before, and I guess it's this interesting. Instead of trans-Pacific, we're talking transatlantic between UK and Ireland, and then North America. And so I was looking at Anime Limited, because remember they had started releasing some stuff over here like Bartender and Be the Beginning. And they had said that they had got a six-figure loan from HSBC UK to help them expedite that, I guess, to expand more and to help them through, I guess, all the issues with the coronavirus, because more people are looking for content, anime or otherwise, but they have to provide that. So that'll help them there as well. And I'm guessing when they say six-figure, they're probably talking in pounds sterling. So that's probably even more money than we can imagine.
So we're probably talking closer to seven figures when it comes to North American dollars, whether it's Canadian or American.
I would hope so.
Canadian maybe, but I'm not sure about American. It's hard to say because it could be on the low end of six figures too, right?
It could be mid six.
I mean, six figures is not enough to license anime, so it probably translates into a seven figure, would be my guess. It's going to cost at least $1 million probably to license a TV show.
Mm-hmm. I would have thought it would just be able to keep certain operations going.
Yeah, I'm also full of shit and don't know anything about numbers. So when I say $1 million, fuck me.
But we heard about this, and we heard about this this cash injection, and then it kind of transitioned over later on. When did this news come out? The 14th. So earlier this week, Anime Limited appointed a former Crunchyroll director to chief marketing officer with them. And
Miles Thomas, yes.
Miles Thomas is
So he left Crunchyroll's director of community marketing and social media, and he started as a sales consultant there. So he definitely worked his way up there and stuff like that. And I was actually reading on the UK side. It was interesting. They were talking about him and his team, at least on the English side of Crunchyroll, that they had won quite a few awards from different outlets, I guess, on the web. Like they talked about Best Social Media Team of 2019 from DigiDay and a few other things that probably we wouldn't really know or remember. But obviously he had traction that helped get the subscribers up on certain things and stuff like that. So that would make him someone they would want to look at and say, hey, do you want to come over to us and help us expand our reach into North America and stuff like that? And he was receptive because he had said before that he really respects their releases and stuff like that. And he talked about, this was Miles' statement from it, which was interesting. He said, at a time of unprecedented media consolidation, there's a greater need than ever for prestige brands with specialized expertise that deliver unparalleled quality to consumers. And so that's what he sees when he sees Anime Limited. And that's true because they do have a lot of prestige releases and stuff like that that you don't always get now from, say, Funimation or other anime companies.
Yeah, it's like discotheque or nothing.
Well, we've talked over past months about Sony, right? And we're going to make a reference to Sony in a bit, but
I suppose
many were worried about the consolidation they have the potential to trigger within the industry. Oh, go ahead.
I forgot about Aniplex when you mentioned Sony. I was like, so it's discotheque, Aniplex, and then everybody else is just bare bones.
But yeah, but you got.
But discotheque, sorry, not discotheque. I meant to say Aniplex. is the one that everyone doesn't like because they have the Japan prices and stuff like that.
Well,
But you
yes.
get the quality. You get the quality. So you make your decision. But way back in the early aughts, we did have to make a decision because we didn't have the cheap sets.
Yeah. Because you have Animago, but they only do Kickstarters now. But I just got their Megazone 2-3 box, and it's very pretty.
Oh yeah.
Any thoughts on that box, JP? Mine's still trying to work its way from North Carolina across the border here to Canada.
I haven't watched it yet, but I just it's cool. Like it's got nice artwork, and I believe it comes with a book.
I mean, I have the
Yeah,
old
they always have
DVDs
a booklet with the
myself.
premiere edition. They put a lot of work in there. I know Bob and them.
I mean, that seems to be the move in terms of in terms of anime these days. I mean, while it's made the move towards more collector items, figures, products, little trinkets.
Well,
In
it
terms of
has to be because like if I
the
can
medium
watch
is,
everything streaming for $5 a month or whatever it costs, $10 a month,
if you're going to ask people to buy a
yeah,
DVD
you got to give me a
or
reason.
a disc, yeah, books.
I'll buy it because it's got a cool director's interview or like all the Japanese trailers. Like, give me something I can't get on
Or a
YouTube.
mini art book or a mini art book sometimes,
Yeah,
right?
the art
Which sounds
books.
to be the case here.
I didn't realize this until like 10 years after I bought it, but the Ninja Scroll Blu-ray that Sentai released has a Yoshiaki Kawajiri commentary when you watch the movie. That's incredible, but they just don't do stuff like that anymore.
And I think that one, I can't remember if it was a new one they did or that was from the manga release and stuff like that.
It might have been.
But it's good. Like that's the one thing about Discotek is they try to find all those old extras, find everything that if they can get, they can put it on the disc, the old dubs, even trying to create liner notes and stuff like that from the booklets and stuff like that. Because as Justin Savakis said, the reason why they do it more digital and put it on the disc versus maybe having the booklet is there's cost, but there's also the fact that people will lose these booklets or they'll deteriorate or whatever.
Yeah.
But for the most part, for the Blu-ray, having it all on there, it's all on there, and the likelihood of someone losing it isn't going to happen. And I think even the memories when the one booklet they had somehow on that disc, they said they put a PDF that you would be able to take off of one of the booklets, I believe,
Yeah.
which is an interesting, nice addition, stuff like that. So you still have a slot on your computer or whatever to go into the files to find it.
Well, the thing about the way Discotheque explains these things, it's they love to tell you that story, so they make you understand the value
Yeah,
of it when you see it.
I like how transparent they are as a company. Like the other day, Justin was streaming as he was cleaning up the Project A release. Like that's not something that any other company would do.
Yeah, they're interesting that way. They are interesting that way. You didn't see that, did you, James?
No, I didn't.
Somehow things always you always seem to manage to see things like that. But yeah, no, I didn't know he. Well, I'm not surprised he did it, but I didn't know about it either.
It wasn't like a big announced event. He was just bored one night and was like, "Hey, I have to do a shitload of work. Does anyone want to just chat while I do it?" Like it wasn't a discotheque sponsored event or anything.
No, but that was pretty cool. That
And
sounded pretty cool.
Yeah, I tuned
that
in for
happens
like
in the
10
video
minutes.
game.
Hmm.
I was just gonna
Okay.
say that happens in the video game space too, right? In indie spaces and stuff like that, they say, "Hey, while I'm doing this pixel art or stuff like that, I'll stream it. Anyone want to come in and chat? They can." So that's nice to see if you ever see them once in a blue moon, right? But you have to actually see the tweet or whatever.
Well, this is the old man kind of starting to show up. How like it sounds like that would be something that's a regular thing you'd see commonly on the proper platforms. So it sounds like a cool thing. Just a little bit of transparency, a little bit of accessibility for fans. And we talk constantly about fans who abuse that privilege. But it sounds like the chance at some sort of accessibility or chatting. It just sounded like a cool thing to have done. But it sounds like it's quite common too.
Well,
That's just
it's
the way I
starting
look
to
at it.
be. I mean, it's not as common in the anime industry because everybody's so secretive, and that's one thing that's very frustrating. And I used to just accept it at face value. is like you'll read all these Anime News Network articles, and they're like, we reached out to Funimation for comment, and they told us to go fuck ourselves, and it's like, what are we doing? You know, like, whereas at least Discotech is out there telling us what's going to be on the disc. It reminds me of there's a place called Just Salad in New York, and I'll give you a guess what they sell. It's just salad. And I
Just
like it because it's on the tin, you know what you're getting. And I feel like Discotech is like the Just Salad of anime. Like, you know exactly what's happening. They'll talk to you. You can follow the producer on Facebook. That's a
Wow.
terrible metaphor.
It's
I just wanted to make that
no,
joke.
I was
because you
thinking
made,
of
but
just
when you
desserts
say,
when you said just salads.
well, when you say those things, when you just said that, I thought of an old David Letterman sketch
Yeah.
way back because one of his first like man on the street type skits he did, he went around New York and found quirky little stores. First, one store he went into was just a store called Just Lamps, and he said, "Okay, what do you sell here? Just lamps? Do you sell shades? No, just you only sell just stands and bulbs. Yep, just lamps. Now, if you were looking for shades, maybe you'll find a store called Just Shades, and then jump cut. He's inside a store called Just
Oh my
Shades,
God.
and I thought that it's and what you just described sounded like the old David Letterman sketch.
Yeah.
And the thing was the woman he talked to in Just Shades was even sharper about what they sold. So it was a really funny bit. But it's like we've had this conversation in the past about the anime industry specifically in Japan and how sometimes isolated and closed up it tends to be sometimes, but sometimes to its detriment.
I would say oftentimes to its detriment. Like, there's so much of the anime industry that is fan run because they just won't do it. You know, like, I only know about when new anime is coming out because of fan sites. You're telling me
Okay.
that Funimation can't put out a TV guide?
Well, yeah, that too. It's more of like my line of thinking, and this has been we've constantly talked about it on the show recently. It's the companies themselves have some trouble concerning its overseas fandom, right? In the past, they focused way too much domestically, and now that market's beginning to cut off a little bit because domestically the population is shrinking, so they have to go a little bit globally now. But within all that lies a few a few issues because it changes. They have to completely change their way of thinking a little bit, and that's the issue that I think the industry there is beginning to face. Mind you, fandom is facing has its own issues with that with it as well, and so begins the talk about how involved should overseas forces be in terms of production of Japanese animation. So there seems to be a developing schism and fracturing of fandom between those who want quote unquote pure Japanese anime and those that are willing to go with things that are a little bit more Western influenced. And I think the Netflix thing ended up being a big part of that discussion. So, and as I said, that's more in past episodes, so you can hear us how we fleshed out those feelings. And well, as I said, that's sort of the crossroads that the industry is now facing there.
It is interesting to say the least, Mike. It's like obviously with the consolidation, it's like they have to go through, I guess, all their channels. And Discotech, luckily, they don't have to do that. But that's obviously for the graces too of the owners because the owners are letting Justin, Brady, and Mike speak on their behalf and stuff like that. And they're okay with that. And obviously they're fans too. So that's luck on our side there. But even when they do speak, sometimes as they say, they have the frustrating moments. I remember Lupin the Third Part 4. They had the frustrating moment because people are saying, why can't I have the dub and the sub on the same disc? And they were saying that months after they had tweeted it out and saying that unfortunately because of the musical tracks and the way TMS in Japan handled things, they didn't want them to do that. They wanted it on two separate Blu-ray discs sold
Oh, I didn't know
Mhm.
separately.
about that.
Yeah, and so unfortunately, it's like you become a broken record sometimes, and people were angry about that. And it's like, well, it was out of our control. It was licensor request. We would have found a way to make everything work, get it on one disc, but they said nope. It's like the international version is for the dub, that's on one disc, and then the Japanese version with the Japanese musical track is on its own separate Blu-ray to be sold and stuff like that. And they had to do it a few times, but they still had people out of the woodworks tweeting them saying, "What are you guys doing?" and blah 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 blah. But I guess that's how life goes sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Anyway, that's I guess that's part of the story now. Okay, all right. Let's go. Let's move on through the other parts of the bullets here. Manga entertainment rebranding as Funimation. Okay, all right. Another anecdote, and then I'll hear your thoughts on this one. Okay, obviously we know about manga in terms of the history it has as a brand, as a company here in North America, and obviously in Europe too. So this sort of reminds me almost 20 years ago when Future Shop in Canada was bought out by Best Buy. And at the time that deal happened, it seemed like Best Buy was interested in the distribution channels that Future Shop obviously developed for themselves in Canada. So that's what made the purchase rather easy. And they were very similar retailers, just for reference, JP. But there was this promise that both brands would remain distinct. And for about a decade, that was the case until about 2014, 2015. Then they announced, Best Buy Canada announced they would eliminate the Future Shop name because that's, I guess, part of the downturn started and they had to close stores. So the obvious thing to do was one of the easier things they did was get rid of the Future Shop name because in the process they could get rid of a good chunk of stores in the process
And the other thing is, some of the
and
stores,
downsize.
ironically, were across the street from each other.
No, yeah,
like in our
that
neck of
was
the woods.
right there, that right in the west end of Mississauga, because one of the regional offices was in Mississauga, and so in opposite corners you had a Best Buy and a Future Shop. Go ahead, Kevin.
I feel
Yeah.
like the writing was on the wall for Future Shop because I don't know, like I would walk into a Future Shop and it just would never seem to look as nice as a Best Buy.
Well, there was and then I think they changed their their concepts as well. I think it was around about a year or so later after the cull there they started to change the concepts.
Also,
Anyway,
and also
and
Future Shop was I don't remember which departments were like this, but I think they did work on a commission structure. I don't think
oh,
it
they
was
did, yes.
full
Correct.
commission,
Yes,
Yeah,
but
I
yes,
think
that
TV and a few appliances and a few things they definitely worked
it
on
was
commission because remember Best Buy in their marketing was saying
that was part of the marketing
we
initially.
don't have anything about commission or stuff like that.
and
Yeah,
I don't
that
know
was
if
their
Future Shop was always like that or not,
okay.
but that
Yeah.
depending on how you look at it, you know, you don't tend to want pushy salesmen as a consumer.
Mm-hmm. And I know that was part of their marketing. Anyway, that's sort of that. That's sort of what the manga thing reminded me of. Manga Entertainment, Funimation, they've both become historic names in terms of the anime industry outside of Japan. Certainly in terms of North America and Europe.
Mhm.
Manga became an established brand in Europe, from if memory
In
serves me right.
UK,
Somebody correct me on that.
correct, because
Specifically the UK.
that's where it started was in the UK and stuff like that, and it was under Island Records was the one that created it. Some people at Island Records they started in the UK, then they came over to the US and bought LA Hero in the early '90s and started the US branch, and then it continued on, and then they were bought out by Anchor Bay Stars, and then it kind of devolved from there, where I guess the UK division went one way, and then the US one was sold to Lionsgate. Lionsgate now holds Manga USA, the brand for that.
So this is a kind of a reflective moment. And then the manga brand in the UK, how did it end up in Sony's hands?
Well, they got sold to Funimation in April 2019, and they were probably the best known and biggest brands for the longest time in the UK, like distributing anime and stuff like that. So it was probably just a natural extension for Funimation to want to go in there, and so the best way was to buy out them.
So
And
this is your Atlantic, this is that Atlantic metaphor we started the segment with. Basically, you had we started with Anime Limited wanting to come from UK to North America, and now we have Funimation extending themselves from North America into the UK.
And since they had the Sony money, it was probably easier to buy Manga UK than to do what ADV did in the early aughts, which was start their own UK branch. Because remember, ADV had ADV UK way back in the day before they unfortunately imploded.
Well, as I said, this is also probably just to help out the channels, which I think is but it's as I said, a reflective moment because it means the phase out of a historic name in the industry,
And I guess they did
albeit a
the
brand.
calculus, right? It's like they thought, okay, but these fans also know us too. And the other thing is, a lot of these discs, when they're, if you look at the Funimation ones, they have region A and B. So a lot of the discs are the same for Australia, New Zealand, North America, and then UK, Ireland, and stuff like that. They're just flipping out the logos and stuff like that. And so
Hmm.
they're helping to streamline things, but there are certain things they'll never be able to get. Like in the UK, they still got to get those things certified by the board for ratings or whatever. So that's when they still have to work through, and that probably helps them having a UK subsidiary that has been through that before, you know what I mean? Because you can't all centralize everything, unfortunately.
Yeah. Do you have a thought on this one, JP? As I said, it's more reflective for me, like
Yeah, I
when I
mean,
think about the titles manga had. But go ahead.
well, I mean, I'm not living in the UK. I don't really know what this means for them because from where just from my perspective, it seemed like a lot of the titles they were getting in the UK were just repackaged Funimation titles anyway. And I could be wrong about that, but
I would
it
say
just
that's
seems like they're
correct
just going to
assumption,
change the
yes.
logo on the box. You know, it sucks, but like manga hasn't been manga for a long time.
So in many respects, no point. Just put the name out of its misery.
I don't
In
know
many
if that's
ways,
necessarily the right way to go about it, but it happened anyway.
or maybe it's just maybe I'm just terming it
they
wrong.
they have to find the right releases and stuff like that. But sometimes when they come back out of their dark space, it still doesn't turn out right. Like we all remember the Mangle name because somehow something would go wrong with a release. And I know with the Ghost in the Shell standalone complex Blu-rays that they released when they were under Lionsgate, they didn't turn out too hot to say the least, and they've had other ones before that that haven't turned out so hot. That's why it's hilarious when we joke about that. We loved Redline, but that release turned out pristine, ironically.
Ghost in the Shell just can't catch a break in that sense. Like the fans can't catch a break.
Hmm.
Well, the ones that care, that is, I guess.
Well, yeah, back to the live action again too.
No, I just mean that there has never been a good Ghost in the Shell disc release that hasn't had some sort of error that that collectors like us would care about.
Ah, okay. Well,
Is the
we'll
4K
see.
release bad? I don't know anything about it. I just bought it, but I don't know if it's good.
I actually
Evan?
don't know about the 4K release, to be honest. I'm not sure.
I haven't seen
Okay.
Ghost in the Shell since I was 15, so it should be an interesting experience.
To
But
watch it again.
Yeah, I didn't care for it back then, so this will be my first time in not 30 years, 15 years.
Oh well, yeah. Okay.
but it's funny thinking back retrospectively, Mike, about manga and even the US side and the UK side is that the early aughts and some of the OVA releases they got, they wanted, I guess, to get to the broader market. So they would cut them into like this movie type experience. And so like Karis, and then there were a few others, you'd get to a point, you'd hear it as they're going with the ending music, but then it would cut to the next episode. And you're just thinking, what just happened? But sometimes they were still great series. Like Karis was still a great series.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Discotek has kind of filled the void of manga here. They don't do the same stuff, but they have, they've got Angel Comp and Genocyber, and they had Mad Bull for a while. And
Yeah, no, they were saving those releases from manga, from CPM, and from
Well,
Urban
they're
Vision as
like
well.
in many
Those,
respects. In many respects, when you think about it, Discotek is everybody else. It is all those older labels. In many respects, that have rolled up.
Yep.
Into one, and then they've added their own sprinkles, like the constant fan engagement.
Yeah,
Like
it's sad to see them go, but like, I don't know. It's just like it's not manga at least on the U.S. side, which we lost them in all but
years
name.
ago.
it's just a brand now.
I just, I don't want to see manga releasing stuff like Ladies versus Butlers. Like they were the Ninja Scroll guys.
No,
Yeah, I
they
know.
were
So
about
Media Blasters
90s
is
anime.
before.
Shell of themselves.
Yeah, that is
in many
what we got.
respects.
Media Black. Yeah, we got the Icon Blu-rays. Thank God.
Oh well. Yeah, and
That
well,
is
Media
not going to be
Blasters.
on the new ADV or the whatever it is. What is anime? And you can just put Icon.
Oh boy.
Well, oh, and I know. Well, I know we'll talk about it more at length at another time. But Media Blasters is just still hanging in there in many respects too. Media Blasters, Sentai, they're probably in similar boats right now. When I think about it, but
Well,
I
Sentai's
suppose.
probably in a better boat and stuff like that.
Yeah,
They
Media.
still got things coming out.
The Sentai probably has an office. I feel like Media Blasters is just John Sarabella posting things from his phone in the bathroom. I mean,
The sad part is,
bless
no,
his
I've met
heart.
him, and like he's went to different conventions. He's been in Maine North. He's a nice guy, but we
I'm
have
not.
to agree that
I love
he
talking to
was
him.
on the
Just
New
for that.
York side of the border, New York City, but he's been in New Jersey for a very long time, and I'm not even sure if they still have an office in New Jersey. So your comment may not be off the mark, unfortunately.
I don't mean that to sound like a
Oh,
diss. I
I
me,
think.
I do like a lot of their releases. It just like
but
it very
I'd say
Well,
much.
they
they'd be
did,
doing it from
and
home though.
in their day, they were a great company.
Yeah, I
In
just
their day,
it's got there must be less than 10 people working for that
Yeah,
company now.
it
he
just went
admitted
shocking.
that too. Yeah, he said that they used to be so big and now they're like 10 people, so they're very trim and they have to really focus on maybe one or two releases a month. And
Yeah.
it's like
Okay,
a live action, a hentai, and an anime.
okay,
Yeah,
Kevin.
I
Kevin,
will
last thought.
I will forever be thankful to John Sarabella for somehow pulling off the license for Kanojo, 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 one of the one of the greatest vanilla hentai titles in the last 10 to 15 years.
Way to go.
You know what the crazy thing is? He said that was the hentai that made him say, "Hey, people are going to buy hentai on Blu-ray." I thought they were all going to like watch it online or something, so that made him continue releasing them on Blu-ray.
Oh well, yeah, I watched that online too, but I want to give a little bit of support every now and then.
Way to
Make
go.
sure you store that safely there, Kevin.
It is
Yeah.
hidden deep in the abyss.
Okay. Well, as I said, those are the names. Well, let's get to the latter phases of the bullets. We go from manga the company to literal manga.
Nice transition.
Don't you
Right.
remember back in the day that too, Mike, where they said people got confused when
With
they
the
had
terms?
manga with the terms because of that very thing? Oh man.
Well, yeah. And
Like, is
now,
manga anime? Is manga comics? I don't know.
well, okay, so we'll talk about, so we'll move away from manga, the imprint, manga, the publisher. Wait, that's not a
It's
good
pronounced
choice of
manga.
words. Thing.
Just like
But
anime is
let's get away from
animation.
let's get away from the anime company. Great. And actually talk about the medium. The three main publishers in Japan put out an interesting little bit earlier this month about what's been popular amongst their print runs. I think it's what is it? The print runs of the last 12 months.
Yeah,
First print runs.
yes, it's
So
the
it is.
manga with the biggest first printings from 2020 to 2021 from
Well,
the big three,
it's a,
which is Kodansha, Shogakukan, and Shueisha.
and
Okay.
to be specific, it's April 2020 to March 2021.
Yes,
Okay. So Kodansha, maybe not so surprising. Number one is Attack on Titan. Shogakukan,
1.25.
yeah, 1.25 million copies printed of volume 31.
I think
Shogakukan, little number one in their ranking was Detective Conan, volume volume 98 at
no surprise.
680,000.
Two
It's an old title, but yeah, not surprising in one sense because it's not a newer title, but not so surprising because it's a historic title.
And it's still on the air too for the anime as well. It's
Okay. Shueisha, One Piece, okay, makes sense. 3.2 million for volume 98. Demon Slayer ended during that period, and so volume 23, 3.2 million. It's a tie. It was a tie for Shueisha. They have one of the most famous titles of the last 20 years, and then one of the titles going right now.
Ooh, if you include Jujutsu Kaisen.
One of the titles going on right now. Well, yeah, true. What Well, first of all, any thoughts on just the showing this list altogether?
I'm seeing some pretty interesting numbers from various titles that I've heard that they're popular, but just didn't think that there were that many in print. Some surprising things that I just wouldn't really have expected at all. I would say Shueisha's was fairly standard. Because you have the big three from the Shonen Jump titles, and there's obviously other Shonen Jump titles in there as well, like
Yeah, One Punch Man, Haikyuu,
IQ, My Hero
Kaiju number 8. I know
Academia.
you're a big fan of that.
Yep. Spy Family is
So,
also very good. And actually, that's pretty surprising. I didn't think it hit 1 million copies already.
mhm.
And they have already announced the anime for that, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Kingdom is interesting, and because that's just something that will probably never come out here, but it's very popular in Asia. Chainsaw Man's pretty cool to see as well. That's also a newer title, and I think that anime is coming out sooner or later too.
Okay.
what about My Hero Academia? I was a little surprised. It was a little lower than I thought, but you never know.
I'm just not surprised it's on the list.
No
And really
surprise on.
that's the part that mattered.
I think
That's the
if
part
there
that
was a
mattered to me.
surprise on the list, but maybe it's just from our perspective outside Japan, is just the Riona Kenshin Hokkaido arc.
I will come back to that in a second.
Uh,
But the thought that came to my head in all of this, because we talked a couple weeks ago about the increased popularity of graphic novels and manga during the pandemic, and these numbers were just fascinating to me. I guess there's a part I'm curious about the comparison for, say, the exact same period a year before. Like, would they
hmm,
have been? Are these higher in comparison, or are these lower in comparison to previous years for that same period?
like just in
That's the
terms
part I was
of
wondering.
overall like copies or
Yeah,
title selection.
copies really, just a sheer number of prints,
Hmm.
sheer number of copies printed.
Because we know on the magazine side, they definitely are going down. They're not printing as much. They're starting, as we said, kicking and screaming, going into digital and stuff like that. But there's
Hmm.
still the print runs of the big ones like One Piece. But the interesting part is sometimes you'll have those series that you're like, oh, they're still going. They're still getting enough. Like Space Brothers for Kodansha is at number 6, and that's volume 38, over 300,000. So that's great to see it's still finding an audience for that type of title, a seinen title. And even Saint Young Men is still
Yeah,
going on. And that's a very unique title about Jesus
Buddha.
and
yeah.
Buddha just chilling together in Tokyo. Yes.
Have a sake.
Yeah, like I actually find Kodansha's list very interesting because I look at What Did You Eat Yesterday, and I do remember that being very popular in Japan, and that pretty much has become a yearly release at best. Yet it still pulls
A
in.
yearly release.
Yeah,
Really?
it comes. I think What Did You Eat Yesterday comes out once a month in Japan in its
Okay.
respective magazine, and then. But I remember whenever I saw those, like when they did those volume sale posts on ANN more often, like the week that What Did You Eat Yesterday comes out, it's usually in the top 5, if
Okay.
not like
Well,
second or third.
hmm so I bring up the whole manga, the sheer number of print runs, because pair that with a Shoujo Beat tweet we saw, and we were on the topic of popularity over the last year during the pandemic. They put out a tweet on Wednesday. Priority for printing will go to new currently running releases first, then very popular series that are out of stock. The more back orders that are placed, the better chance those volumes will be reprinted sooner. And that kind of falls in line with all this talk about back issues and new print runs of older volumes.
And I think they've always said over the last few years, if you want something and you want it to stay in print and stuff like that, give us the pre-order and tell us you want it. You know what I mean? Or tell the retailers you want it, because then they
Hmm.
might get a few extra volumes and stuff like that.
Mind you, failing that, there's always the digital.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, we've seen that on
yeah.
Kodansha's side, that's for sure. They, especially for
Mhm.
longer series for them, because they're just not willing to take that risk. And even omnibusing some of those longer ones, they're not willing to do it, even if they're completed. They've just done digital.
Yeah,
I
Yeah.
there's
almost
part of the
exclusively
issue.
read digital manga now. It's so expensive. I
Well,
um
it's
I bought a
go
couple
ahead.
volumes for the first time in years the other day, and it was like 60 or $70 for 3 books.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
Whereas I could pay
Again,
$2 and read as much Shonen Jump as I want.
see, that's part of the issue for me. It's just, yeah, I see where you're going with that. I just see where you're going with that. And plus, as I said, I have way too much physical books myself. Here I am about to read a digital copy, albeit a library copy of the book that the live action Japanese movie Funikuli Funikula was based on. But we talked about Japanese movies because of a film festival that happened here
Hmm.
virtually, by the way,
Nice.
JP. So I'm about to read that book, and much of I like stuff I've become curious about, admittedly, and maybe there's a degree of guilt, but at least they're all legal sources. I've watched stuff digitally recently, or read stuff digitally in recent months. So there's okay, I get it, and maybe that's just there's that tension between the pragmatic 44-year-old that I am right now, and then the collector that I was in my younger years.
I
Right?
guess I've always been more willing to buy anime than manga, and maybe it's just because I've read more manga digitally, be it through apps or scanlations. It's always just made more sense to me to buy anime, and I don't know why. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
just the price differential, especially like the types of books that are aimed at older audiences always cost more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, that does
yeah.
happen.
And
Make a little bit
I'm not
more.
talking about porn. I'm talking about just like 20th Century Boys easily cost like $5 more than a copy of Naruto.
Those are big. Those are big. Those are big volumes too.
Yeah, those are the
At least the older
omnibus
Yeah.
ones.
ones, right? So
I'm
yeah,
talking
the
about
Even
when they were
even
doing
the
single
singles, yeah.
volumes.
No, I'm talking about like I'm talking because the footprint was
Because
yeah. I get
Naruto
it.
used
I
to
get
be
it.
$8 a book, whereas the 20th Century Boys, and that was before the increase to $10. Whereas 20th Century Boys was always 13 at retail,
Yeah.
U.S. That is.
Yeah,
Mm,
because we used to have the really expensive releases back in the 90s. Then once Tokyo Pop had their little revolution saying, okay, $10 is the price and stuff like that, but that only lasted for a good long while before everyone realized they had to increase their prices to keep up certain quality or keep the color pages. So now, as you said, for those older titles, we're now at $14 to $15 a pop, and we're talking US prices now.
I think it's just the mentality that the collector's mentality. They and the companies know that too.
That's me 100%. Like I was about 50-50 when it came to anime and manga purchases back in the mid 2000s when I jumped into the hobby, but I want to say around maybe 2012, 2013 is when I saw my anime watching drop off precipitously, and then I would realize that I just preferred watching anime with other people. It was more of a social thing for me, whereas if I was, just by myself, I would prefer to read manga, and then I saw my manga purchases uh, surpass my anime purchases, and actually for quite a while I was not buying anime just because I just wasn't watching a lot of new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I was maybe only watching at most one or two or three things a year. So that's
Yeah.
And I have to
I
say, when
get
it comes to like the digital versus physical thing, I will say that uh I am blessed to have space to have my manga sit here and be unread.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've noticed that when I did a big purge a few years ago, and I got rid of maybe 60 to 75% of my like anime and video games, but I maybe only got rid of like 10 or 15% of my manga. It's just interesting to see where my preferences shifted over the years.
Or where they've been, in my case.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do we have anything else to mention on all of this? And then I'll go back to Kenshin.
I do want to bring up a couple of things, like at least a couple of titles on the lists, so to speak.
Oh, that still got your attention on the lists?
Yeah, like
All right, just quickly. Just
I
quickly.
knew quintessential quintuplets was popular, but I didn't think it'd be that popular. Like I was
Enough to be
really
number 2
surprised,
on the
very
Roundtable
surprised to
rank.
see that high.
I wasn't actually surprised by that one because I knew it was getting the sales and stuff like that, from what I understood.
Didn't
Mm-hmm.
think it'd be second. I like to see, Chifer still sticking around. Good manga.
That one was surprising because it's at volume 44, so they're still getting the sales.
Oh, look, the final volume of Seven Deadly Sins. Okay.
Yep. And it's interesting to see with Shogakukan how few titles I don't like. I really don't recognize that many of them. Like, and it proves to show that we just don't get as many of their titles out here in comparison to the other two.
Okay, that's a fair point. I guess because it's Viz, and then Viz is just all in with the other side of itself,
Yeah, like
the Shueisha side.
Blue Giant ended up going to Seven Seas, so that's coming out now. Freyren
Mm-hmm.
is a recent title that's been popular, and Viz has that license for this fall. Uh, Do Not Say Mystery really intrigues me because that's Yumi Tamura's newest works. She's the creator of Basara and Seven Seeds. Some people may have watched that shitty adaptation on Netflix. Also, just one last thing. Another title on Kodansha's that caught my interest that was at the bottom of the list. A couple of Cuckoos, which is I think it's Mish. It's the creator of Yamada the Seven Witches and Yankee Kunta Megane-chan. To think that that has that many copies in circulation early in its run makes me think that that one will have a good chance of being successful. And I think it's Miki Yoshikawa is the creator. I've always liked her works.
You just keep up, Kevin. Okay. So do you want me to go back to Kenshin for 1 second?
Sure.
Can't
Actually,
wait.
All
actually,
right. Here's that yes or no.
I was gonna say
Oh,
one thing
Oh,
actually.
okay. Go for it, James, and then we'll start to wrap it.
I was thinking what Kevin said about the list there in Chicago kind of just made me think of like how few we have on the signature line that you think could be on there, but they don't do it. But at least now they're actually reaching out to other companies to license them out, like Seven Seas and
yeah.
Dark Horse. When in the aughts and stuff like that, or 15 years ago, they weren't even doing that, so they just were just sitting there, unless they got a really popular anime that's like, oh, we probably should get that out.
Or if they actually
Mm-hmm.
went directly to the artist somehow, like with Gantz, or like with Clamp, or like with Blood Blockade Battlefront, because that was, I believe, Shueisha, and then there was Tenjo Tenge. So like the odd exception, but otherwise, yes. Like trying to get anything from Shueisha and Shogakukan was immensely difficult if you were not called Viz Media.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely once Shonen Jump, it's like, hey, this is our bread and butter, everyone.
Okay. So on so sort of starting to come away from that topic and to end it off, back to Kenshin. Yes, Kenshin's continuation, the Hokkaido arc, is on this list. It's on the Shueisha side, it's number 14, or tied for 14th, I guess. Volume 4, 350,000 copies. We've talked in previous weeks about Kenshin. We mentioned that the trailers for the final 2 live action movies were released, and will eventually, the movies themselves, come out within the next couple of months. I think May or June or something like that. Re-listen to the past episodes. Yes or no? And here's the little game I said I'd play.
Oh
JP.
boy, here we go.
Yes or no? And I have to highlight it so I can read it properly. The next live action Kenshin movies coming to North America, and remember, keep in mind, 1, the Hokkaido manga has been outright canceled in North America because of the personal issues of Watsuki himself.
That's one way
writer.
to put it.
So how much has that affected the possibility of seeing the final 2 live action Kenshin movies come to North America officially?
Did the others come out? You may have.
Yes, they have. Funimation released
like
them
recently
over the last number of years. And it was a few years back, and I don't know if it was before or after.
I'm gonna go on
Watsuki's,
Right Stuff and just see what happens when I type Kenshin and Blu-ray and DVD. See what happens. So we have Kenshin 1, 2. We have 3 movies. You said this is the 4th movie.
4th and 5th are about to come out.
So let's see when this one came out. 2017. I'd say it's probably likely then.
So you think yes?
2017. That's like because the whole he got arrested in like what 2013, 2015.
Okay,
I'm not
like this tells you about about the time I was away from the scene. So you think it'll happen?
I mean, I'm not sure. I'm gonna look up to see when that happened, but it definitely happened before 2017.
Okay, but you think it'll?
I think if the other 3 movies are easily available on Right Stuff right now, I don't see any reason why a company would suddenly gain a conscience.
2017.
Oh, was it
The Scandal? The
Scandal? Was that recent?
Yeah.
Oh boy,
late November in 2017.
Oh, you're right.
So this could go either way.
Okay, well, yeah, and this movie came out January 2017. Okay, so now I'm going to say no.
But they still had them on sale and stuff like that, so you never know.
Well, if it's already in there.
But it could be, I'd say, a lukewarm maybe for me, because you never know. But it's not like they're going to release it as fast as some of their other live-action properties.
They do
you might see it a couple of years later, something like that, and it's just ship it out. That's all they'll do.
It could go either way, because while they did cancel the Hokkaido arc in North America, they never how do I put this? They never did stop sales of the original Rurouni Kenshin manga. Those were you can still buy that right now if you'd wish.
Yeah, those are still in. Well, and Funimation just added Kenshin to their app pretty recently.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I'm going to go off on a limb and say I would be surprised, because that type of stuff is tough to live down. That type of stuff is going to come up.
Yeah, but Viz has clearly shown that they don't care. I mean, they just they just published the newest manga from the Toriko guy. And the only reason that's not in the book anymore is because it got canceled for bad ratings.
Yep.
You know, like they don't, if it makes money, they're going to do it. I don't trust any of these bastards.
Well, yeah. And I guess that comes down to the popular urban lyric that we constantly state from the Wu-Tang Clan.
Mm-hmm.
Cash rules everything around me. Get the money, dollar bill, y'all. And that's the only thing. If a company knows they can still, like, that's, I guess, how Kenshin has still managed.
Well, a lot of people just don't know. Think about, like, if I became a fan today, what are the odds that I'm going to know that the writer of this cool samurai book is a pedophile? If I just see it at the bookstore, it's not like it's going to be written on the cover. They're just
And
banking on
Shueisha
people not to
clearly,
know.
Well, they'll or at least they'll do their best to cover it up.
and Shueisha was clearly trying to uh, keep Watsky afloat in that sense. Like they kind of made him go away for a while,
It
and
wasn't even a
then
year.
yeah, in the end, he really only got a slap on the wrist
Hmm.
because there's so
But
much money tied to his work.
well, that isn't that what it usually comes down to.
It's
Yeah.
interesting to me because Kenshin, I liked Kenshin a lot, but it's not like Watsuki did anything good after Kenshin.
Well, that's
And
the other thing.
Kenshin kind of
Possible one
ends.
hit wonder.
It ends
Because he had to go
poorly.
back. Yeah.
The anime is terrible at the end. The last arc was so bad I had to turn it off.
Oh, of the anime, yes. The manga.
I never finished the manga.
Manga was
I
manga
need
was
to
good.
read the last 5 volumes of the manga still.
Like the original.
Yeah, I got up to volume
Yeah,
23 and it just fell
I
off.
thought it was great. I thought it was
Well, and
great.
then they made
But
those
then again, there's
movies
that
that
bias.
were terrible. Like Reflections was so bad, and it was in a different art style.
Oh yeah. Well, I had fun with it personally.
Trust and Betrayal was
Just
dope, but
way too but and ultimately quite depressing, which wasn't always the tone. But I thought I took fascination. But that's just me.
Am I the only one that thought Buso Renkin was okay?
you're the only one that remembers Buso Renkin.
You remember
I
that
remember
again?
reading that in the library. And
Wow.
I thought, yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
I think that's somewhere buried in the boxes at
Was it
least. So maybe I can dig it
Wasn't
up.
the villain like a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure character? He was like a butterfly.
Yeah, it's Papillon was his name. Yeah, he had the butterfly mask and everything, and
Oh
And
boy.
then
very
he,
Oh, there you
flamboyant.
go.
then he tried to do, I think it was called Gunblaze West,
Yes,
which
Yes.
that
I read
didn't
that
get an
too.
anime.
Oh yes.
And that got canceled early. And then he has a work that never came out here, which was, I think, based off of Frankenstein. That was in Jump Square.
Christ.
So I ran with Claymore and like those monthlies.
Yes.
That just never came out here for whatever reason.
Yeah, he just went back to Kenshi. You know, I have this theory. I was going to write an article about this, but I couldn't figure out how to make it more than like 2 paragraphs long, but that Kenshin is this secret allegory about how he's been a pedophile and afraid to tell people, because the whole entire Kenshin story is about how this guy's an irredeemable murderer, but like somehow we all forgive him. You know, like
Wow.
the entire story is
Wow.
like, I killed everybody, including my wife, but I'm a nice guy. And everyone's like, oh,
Wow.
Kenshin, you silly oaf. I don't care that you murdered hundreds of people.
You know,
Well, I mean, creators sometimes see a lot of
Yeah.
themselves. Okay, Kevin, last thought.
you know,
Good one. I like it.
I had that moment in Act Age as well.
Yeah.
Ah.
I
Is
was
there a
going through
redeemable
some of-
plot line about a guy that touches underage? I can't even. This isn't even fun to
Oh,
joke
just-
about.
Do it, Jiffy.
I just,
Well,
like,
because it was
Wow.
pretty much, I guess you could boil it down to this like older man finds this teenage girl and wants to make her a movie star.
yeah.
That's like, and there's,
Oh wow.
it's
Okay.
generally, it's a pretty, honestly, it is a good manga. Like, there's a reason why was still so drawn to it and why I was still willing to buy the 2 volumes that came out in English before it got canned, as it pains me to admit. But you look through certain scenes and the manga was really innocuous. Like, there really wasn't a lot of fan service, so to speak. Like, and the women in that manga are developed pretty well, but then there are the odd moments here and there that just makes you think, in this now that you know what happened to Motsky, it's just like, this scene could be looked at in a different way.
That does not surprise me.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. You think about those things these days.
I didn't read that
I mean,
manga,
that's just
so
human nature too. But it's also human nature when you see a star, when you see an artist, they find themselves on the wrong side of the law. Then you look at their recent works and just think about that.
Well, one of my favorite memes ever is it's a cannibal corpse headline, and it says like Cannibal Corpse singer found with skulls and guns in his house, and then the other part of the meme is a screen cap of the Cannibal Corpse top songs. And it says like song number 1, I have guns in my house. Song 2, they're for murder. Song 3, I have skulls in my backyard.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Just an outlet, right? Just an outlet.
They're not real songs, but it's
See?
I have guns for murder.
There you go. On that note, well, speaking of guns, hey, what do you think of the bullets? See, I told you they can turn out into longer things later on.
Oh, good bullets. I was like, what is he talking about?
We also went over time, Mike. Can you believe it?
Yes, we did.
Couldn't even make
Yeah,
it to 90 minutes, or couldn't even
we,
make
we,
it
no,
at
we,
90
well, we
minutes.
did make it.
Yeah, we
We
kinda
made it
went
over
over.
90, and I was worried about that. Anyway, JP, thanks for coming back again.
Yeah,
And
glad to be here.
So, where can we find you these days?
I have a site called gonzo.moe where I was writing a lot for a while, and then I went back to work and I was just too tired to write. But I have lots of fun articles on there. I was covering the news for some time. But lately I've been doing a podcast called The Newsbroom, where I just talk about the latest headlines. They're usually like 20 to 30 minutes long.
Oh wow, which is only a fraction of the length of an episode of this.
Yeah, it's hard to talk about only the news when you're alone for more than
True.
20 minutes. But now that I have internet, I hope to start having people on and expand what we talk about. Me being me, I guess, because I'm the only one currently on the show. But
Are we allowed? Can we ask to come on sometime?
yeah, I would love to. I just have to have a day off.
Yeah. So those are the obvious places we can meet. Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter is gonzo.moe. You have to spell out dot, don't use a period. And yeah, I spend a lot of time on Twitter. So that's really it. It's Twitter. That's how you get me. And then the podcast. I don't have anything else to advertise.
We'll put up the links in the show notes for sure, and so people can keep up with you, what you're up to these days.
Sick.
So once again, thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
We'll give our contact information. So once again, just to recap, if you have anything to mention to us, don't forget where you can contact this show as well. animeroundtable@gmail.com is our email address. Twitter, Instagram @animeroundtable, and animeroundtable.com for our show notes and past episodes. And just a quick reminder, wherever you get your podcasts, don't forget to leave us a review, because good reviews will help us in terms of the algorithm and expose us. That's a bad choice of words.
Don't say expose after talking about the Act Age guy.
Yeah, after talking about Watsuki, no, that's a bad choice of words. Give us a chance to be visible, hey, to people who could possibly listen to this podcast. And at which point Kevin will say,
please leave us a 5-star review wherever it lets you to do that.
Typically, we do shows once every other week, but then we'll try and do the odd episode during off weeks. Regardless, wherever you're listening to us or watching us, and hopefully there'll be a watching component soon, just hit the subscribe button so you can be notified whenever we drop in a new episode. But that's all we got for this time around. Until next time, thanks for listening. Join us again for another edition of the Anime Roundtable. Cool. So you got plenty of time to still do your shopping?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's not even 4:00 yet.